Thank you very much. Mr. Akasaka, my colleagues at the podium, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Good evening. Good evening. That's better. I was saying to Chris that I am so animated and so worked up by your presence, I was tempted to throw away my text and ask you to stand up and hold hands and sing together, "We Shall Overcome." But I desisted. I desisted because such informality is not normal in UN circles, and I cannot sing. But first, let me congratulate the United Nations for establishing this theme for the 63rd DPI NGO meeting. I must also congratulate my friend, Mr. Akasaka, sincerely on the arrangements for the conference, for having invited me to participate. It has been a really enriching experience. And the overriding memory I will take away is one of energy, collegiality, and a palpable enthusiasm for change. And if I might use the words of the Jamaican poet Bob Marley, there was a natural mystic flowing through the air. The theme is most appropriate at this time, and I believe that the written declaration of the conference captures some of the energy, captures some of the mystic, and uses words that transmit them to the MDG review meeting, which, as Mr. Akasaka has said, will take place at the end of the month. I am sure that everyone here appreciates that advancing global health and achieving the MDGs are not separate and discrete problems. There's a causal relationship. The only way global health can ever be achieved is through meeting the MDGs. Complete global health, like health for all, is a powerful aspirational goal that in some sense is timeless. But the MDGs are practical, time-bound, and achievable. This is not the place to count in percentage terms the level of success or failure by countries and regions in achieving the MDGs. I would rather deal briefly with some of the fundamental principles related to the overall theme of this conference that have informed the intense discussion and the lively and animated debates during the past 3 days and are central to this essential objective. So as I listened to the debates in the roundtables and in the workshops and interacted with the numerous committed advocates for improving global health, I have been strengthened in my conviction about what really is the essence of that global health we seek. Practitioners of, or advocates for global health, have to be committed to the ideal that it means the health of all the people of the globe. And it is the reduction of the health inequities globally that is the nub and the pith of the actions to achieve that health. The inequalities that now exist within and between countries, they shame human conscience. And I am comforted that this conference is wedded to the idea that there's a moral imperative to reduce these inequalities that are both iniquitous and unjust. And I pray that especially the young ones among you will take this as an inescapable charge and an inescapable challenge. The inequities that impede the progress in global health are seen in the MDGs, all the MDGs, because I subscribe to the thesis, as the Secretary General has pointed out, that MDGs are indissolubly interconnected, and herein lies a major challenge for us all. How can we deal with the specificity needed in terms of procedures, systems, and technologies to be applied to the individual MDGs and still retain that vision of a collective approach? That a collective approach that has as its endpoint human progress and development. And I have been pleased to note that there can be close cooperation among the non-governmental organizations that are theme-specific, and that we can avoid that disciplinary reductionism that has bedeviled many social efforts. But even although we embrace the interconnectedness of the MDGs and the notion that collectively they point to improvement in human well-being, let us be clear, let us be pellucidly clear that there is no fixed hierarchy or sequence to them. It is not necessary for there to be achievement of the non-health MDGs before health can improve. It is essential that we keep our eyes fixed on the need to reduce or eliminate poverty, but let us be equally firm in the conviction that we do not all have to be filthy rich before we become healthy. There can be significant improvement in global health that is not inextricably linked to an increase in national wealth. And I was pleased to note that the concept of rights, so eloquently put forward by the Princess and by my previous speaker, was explored in relationship to global health, as the reduction of inequities touches on the need for observance of some basic and fundamental human rights. Because I am of the school that believes that one of the essential human rights is that every individual has the right to those sanitary and social measures necessary for the protection and restoration of her or his health. And the observance of that right is essential for providing the systems and the technologies we need to advance across the world in the achievement of the MDGs. But there's yet another theme that struck me as I listened to the debates. There can be no global health unless there's international health. There can be no progress in the reduction in the inequities in the MDGs unless there's international action in health. And this international action needed now must be grounded in a pluralism that gives power to the work of the non-governmental organizations and civil society. And the demonstrated commitment of this gathering would convince any doubter, any skeptic, that international must no longer be seen as coterminous with intergovernmental. And there are other actors beside governments that have a role and a voice in our countries, have a role and a voice in the nations of the world, which must cooperate among themselves to achieve the MDGs. And the principal actors in our nations, which must cooperate at the national level and across national boundaries, are, of course, governments, private sectors, and you, the non-governmental organizations. And the progress in the area of HIV has been a classic example of the power of the international cooperation and collaboration among civil society groups. And this growth and this strength of pluralism at the national and global levels is one of the aspects of the changing world that we must take into account as we approach the steps necessary to achieve the MDGs. I speak with some feeling about the interconnectedness of the MDGs and the collective thrust to reducing inequity and improving health, human well-being. Because as Mr. Akasaka said, I'm the UN Special Envoy for AIDS and HIV in the Caribbean. I was former chair of a Caribbean Commission on Health and Development. And we could recognize that there was need for advocacy, not only for attention to HIV in that region, but also for there to be recognition of what I refer to as a tsunami of chronic non-communicable diseases in that part of the world. And these diseases, heart disease, stroke, diabetes, cancer, lung disease, they represent an epidemic of gigantic proportions, as the Princess pointed out. And the call to address them nationally, regionally, and globally, and dispel the myths that shroud them has an urgency that is now impatient of debate. And there's good evidence that it will be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to achieve the MDGs if we do not now confront the challenge of the non-communicable diseases. As an example of the complementarity, interconnectedness of these diseases, we know that we cannot think of eliminating tuberculosis in a population unless we address the problem of diabetes. And we know that these diseases are a heavy burden on women particularly. and not only affect the poor predominantly, but represent a major reason for families to fall into a poverty trap or fail to escape from it. And the commonality of risk factors for these diseases, smoking, physical inactivity, inappropriate diet, is well established. And the corrective action needed implies modification of our external enabling environment. And that has to be done by our governments. And the need to change the external enabling environment is complementary to the need for personal behavioral change and calls for the kind of persistent and insistent and focused advocacy that can come from you, the non-governmental organizations. I'm sure that many of you here laud and applaud the decision of the United Nations to convene a high-level meeting of heads of state and government in September 2011 to address the problem of the NCDs. And the health systems, to deal generically with all these problems, will, for a start, have to embrace three critical elements. There must be some system of universal health coverage and universal access to care. It is essential that there be the requisite health workforce, and it is essential that we must have a good system of health information. And universal health coverage represents access to key promotive, preventive, and curative and rehabilitative health interventions. And I hope that this can be a subject, Mr. Akasaka, for one of your future conferences, as there are few more egregious manifestations of inequity than can be found in access to health care. And universal coverage is essential for achieving the MDGs. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me end by emphasizing these 3 points. 1, achieving global health with the emphasis on reducing inequity is a major task, but measurable progress is through addressing all the MDGs. 2, the necessary genuine international, I stress international, cooperation has to be rooted in a pluralist approach. 3, global health and the essential health goals of the MDGs will not be achieved unless we address the non-communicable diseases. And the last point I would make is that a major underlying concern must, as the Princess said, be a realignment of our health systems, a reconceptualizing of primary care with emphasis on chronic care and emphasis on universal coverage with access to those sanitary and social measures to which every woman and every man has a fundamental right. Let me thank you. Let me wish you all a safe return home. And the words of an old Jamaican farewell, walk good, my friends, walk good.